Welcome. I am Elizabeth Trotman, the Senior Vice President of Civic Leadership Programs and Initiatives for Foundation for the Carolinas. Today, I'm pleased to welcome you to a panel discussion, an important conversation titled Youth Voice, a discussion on mental health. We began this conversation a few weeks ago with local therapists and a nonprofit leader with a focus on obtaining insight and expertise related to youth mental health. That session, titled Are Our Kids Okay? Checking in on the mental health status of our youth, is available on Vimeo. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of speaking directly with youth in our community. And so I'd like to start by welcoming our distinguished panel. We'll begin with just introducing Mira, Brianna, and Malachi, who are leaders in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Youth Council, which is a program of Generation Nation. Wave. Ifuru, who is known as Ifuru the Guru and is a recent graduate and public speaker. And then Gerard, a rising senior and football star. And Andrea, our college student on the line, who is also a Greater Step scholar. So welcome everyone. So glad that you all have taken the time to lend your expertise and your experience as youth in our community. So I'd like to start with you, Ifuru, and really thinking about what we knew about experiences in terms of mental health for you, for your peers. What were you seeing, hearing, experiencing before COVID? And then what are some things that you saw that happened after COVID that were of impact? And then we'll open it up to everyone to share.
Well, before COVID, that's kind of hard to remember a little bit, but I know that the problems that we had before COVID are the problems that we had after COVID. They were just more amplified, like centered around mental health when it comes to feeling alone, anxiety, acceptance, and having that peer-to-peer, you see me, I see you. It just came more and heightened when we could no longer fake it. When we were around each other, it became more real.
Mm-hmm. Malachi, I see you nodding your head that you see me, I see you, and talk about that and what were the things that you saw that were more visible as a result of COVID?
I saw the lack of social networking because before COVID, we wasn't kind of afraid to go out and be with our friends. Now, going into COVID, it was kind of like afraid to go with my friends now because I might get, COVID. So I'll say the social life.
Mm-hmm. Andrea, did you want to add to that?
Well, in regards to the you see me, I see you thing, I did notice that people were more conscious of, the fact that people were struggling during the pandemic more than before. That was my observation. People were checking up on me more. It seemed like teachers kind of had more leniency, especially in college. Whereas beforehand, I've kind of been struggling with my mental health for a few years, and during the pandemic, I sought a lot of help with that. And I've noticed that people try to recognize that more now after the pandemic. Like they're a bit more, what's the word? Empathetic.
Mm. So there's you're starting to feel more seen, more heard. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I think so, yeah.
And then, thinking about loss and the loss of experiences and the loss of voice. Mira, can you talk about that and maybe how that has impacted you and Gerard too, as an athlete, your perspective there?
Yeah, I think the loss of experiences during COVID has really made me very antsy and eager to leave the house and go places. I think being stuck in my house most days made me feel upset that I couldn't go anywhere or see anyone. And it sort of translates into me feeling annoyed by my family sometimes because I'm stuck with them. And so I think at times I felt very frustrated. But as far as loss of voice goes, I actually experienced the opposite during COVID because I joined Charlotte-Mecklenburg Youth Council, and that's actually given me a voice in important civic issues, and it allows youth to provide their perspectives to policymakers. So I'm really grateful for that.
So there have been some positive things to come out of this, and that your voice was amplified. Gerard and Brianna, tell us, your thoughts on loss of experiences, loss of voice, or gaining a voice.
I'll go ahead and go first. Personally, as an athlete, COVID-19 has affected my life extremely. This is the first time since like middle school where I haven't been playing football for a full season. And so this fall was very different for me. I picked up a lot of new things. I learned a lot of new things, my family members and my parents and my sister. And I also picked up habits like cooking, and this is my first time doing laundry 24/7. It was a lot of new stuff I thought I would never be doing and that I learned through COVID-19. So it's crazy how the negative impacts can turn to positive impacts as well.
Thanks for that. Doing laundry. If anyone had a secret for that, that would be good to know. Brianna, tell us your thoughts as well.
I think that a lot of self-reflection happened during the COVID-19, and a lot of teenagers and even adults were self-reflecting to see how we best learn and how we best flourish. For example, being an introvert or extrovert, that was very apparent through the COVID-19 pandemic. You could see the people who are extroverted were struggling during the pandemic and their quarantine because they couldn't interact with other people. I learned that I'm an introvert, and I learned how to navigate, and even through different personality types. If you are very structured, if you are mellow, if you are very direct, you can find all of that out. And I think the COVID-19 in a positive light allowed us to do a lot of self-reflection. And like Andrea said, it highlighted the insecurities and the negatives that we saw in the community. And the quarantine actually allowed us time to make a plan to make it better, and then advocate for those who are not being advocated beforehand.
That's very interesting and great call outs, Gerard and Brianna. I'm thinking about, what you said about what you both, learned about yourself and new skills and new things that you learned. Anyone want to add about what other things that you saw and learned in that time of isolation? And, how are you feeling now that, things are starting to open up? And I want to kick that over to Malachi and then Ifuru to take us, and then anyone jump in.
What I learned coming out the pandemic is that it's okay to voice your opinion. I can say before the pandemic, I was a little high strong about voicing my opinion, because I know sometimes I can get real strong. But being with the Charlotte Mecklenburg Youth Council, it allowed me to really open up more and express how I feel the correct way. And it taught me really how to structure my opinion without coming out of anger and things of that nature.
Thank you. Ifuru, I know you were going to say something, and then Andrea.
Well, coming out of the pandemic, I've definitely learned how important it is to define our voices. And it just goes so perfect to what Malachi was talking about on how to express himself correctly. And it's just like coming out of the pandemic, it just taught me that there's a lot of problems in this world. like a lot, social, economically, like environmentally. And for you to speak on even one of them, you have to define your perspective. And being isolated and being like by myself, but also, you know, in close contact with my family that I hadn't lived with in probably 3 to 4 years, like all of us in one house, it's shown me how to pick a position and play that position to its greatest strengths. And I mean, that's something that I wouldn't have got without isolation and the close proximity with the people that I was close to.
Wow, that's a great lesson for adults, for all ages. Both of those are great lessons. Andrea, you were going to share.
Just going off of what Brianna said, that I also did a lot of self-reflection. I also realized that I'm an introvert and I need my alone time. And Myra mentioned this too, that like, you know, like being at home all the time, it's like your family doesn't leave you alone. And it can be kind of difficult to find that me time. And, you know, like during quarantine, I also, you know, found a therapist and psychiatrist. And I've seen like a huge difference in sort of my self-esteem and everything. So that's like that's a huge positive that I've had because of the pandemic, is that you know, still being in Charlotte and not being able to go to Raleigh for college kind of like forced me to sort of like introspect a lot more. And you were talking about loss of experiences too. When COVID like first hit, like when lockdown started, I was a senior in high school, so we didn't get to have like any of the senior things that we have at the end of the year, like senior prom. Like we didn't even have graduation. We had like a drive-through graduation. And you know, my first year in college, I was on campus for a month, and then then we basically all got kicked off because cases started going up, and you know, I spent the whole first year at home. So that's definitely another experience that I lost, was having, you know, that first year of college, meeting people and everything.
You know, I really appreciate your statement about obtaining a therapist, and I think that's so valuable and important, and just commend you for that. And you know, as we talk about youth mental health, just knowing that there are resources and taking advantage of those resources is such a wise thing to do. I do want to segue from what you were speaking about and continue talking about the disruption with school. And, you know, what was that like for everyone? And how did you navigate that space? You know, how was it in the beginning of that? Where is it, you know, now we're at the end? How are you feeling about next year? Whoever wants to kick that one off.
Well, I know that I was kind of like on the back end of what Andrea was talking about when she was talking about how when COVID hit, she was in her senior year and then she went into her freshman year of college. Well, for me, I was in my junior year going to my senior year, which I just believe those like 4 years are very important, just because junior to senior is like, it's a lot of responsibility and it's a lot of like small tasks that usually you get help with throughout the year, whether that's friends that you're talking to in class, your teachers, your counselor. It's like, it was a lot. And going back to what you had talked about, am I breaking up?
You're still with us.
Okay. And going back to what you're talking about when you talked about our voices feeling silenced. I've always been an outspoken student, person, child, whatever. And I know that when my senior year came up and it was so many things that I didn't know, and trying to communicate through emails, it felt very, very silencing because I couldn't communicate with my counselors and school officials the way that I needed to for me and for my understanding and my way of learning. And so like the disruption in school really changed the way that I work and the way that I function now. And it almost gave me like a super launch into my adulthood where it's like, you better get it or it just won't get got. And so it's been a real perspective shifting time. And I feel like though it was stressful at the end of the day, in hindsight, it was very much beneficial to the next stages of my life.
Thank you for that, and for some great tools and tips that you really got out of this experience. Other thoughts?
Transitioning from, I was a sophomore when it hit, when COVID came, and I'm now a rising senior. So I did not like school. My mental health when I was in school was terrible. And I think it was really bad because I'm in the IB program and it's extremely competitive. So being near your classmates all the time, constantly hearing, oh, I got a 98, just hearing the constant comparison, and then being able to go online and be by myself and really worrying about learning and not the grades per se. I flourished in the online setting because for me, my mental health was way better. I was happier. It was really bad to a point my hair started falling out and I was breaking out when I was in school. So I have a great anxiety when we have to go back to school. Like, I don't want to go back. I am going to go back as a senior in high school, and I'm not looking forward to it at all, because we're now going to be comparing, what college did you get into? What scholarship did you get? What did you get on this test? What did you get on your IA? What did you get on your like, all of that seems overwhelming to me. And I know a lot of students are really excited to go back to school, but I am crumbling inside the thought of me going back to school, waking up at 5 a.m. to go back to this large place. And I feel like many other students are sharing these same feelings when I'm talking to other rising seniors or even freshmen. Or even, for example, my brother going to middle school for the first time. He was a sixth grader this year, but now he's going to be a seventh grader. He's never even been to middle school, but he's an extrovert, so he's excited for that. I think that the mental health could be different ways for different people. For extroverts, it could be great, but for introverts like me, I want to cry.
That's a great call out to hear, because I think that there is often the assumption that, okay, we're opening up, we're going back, everybody's ready to go. And I will say, who is ready to go though? Is there anybody that's on the side of, I'm ready to get back in there. I've got to get back in there.
Can I just say that I also did IB in high school, and like also if Rue mentioned this too, that like, that senior year, that's when you're like applying to college. You have to like plan out your future. There's so much going on, and I just can't picture doing that without feeling like you have that guidance there, especially because like, my mom didn't go to college, and so it's like I kind of had to be the one to figure out all of it, along with help from like other adults and other support networks. And I think being at home, it would feel like you wouldn't have that at all. So I can see how that would be super difficult as a senior. But also like with the IB program, I went through like a similar experience, just that there was a lot of comparing with other students. Like IB kind of isn't designed for an American public school with tons of students. Students usually excel like in countries where schools only have like 20 students or like 10 students per teacher. So, I struggled a lot in IB as well, and it really affected my self-esteem in high school. So I just want to say that like, I definitely understand that experience, Brianna.
So let me ask to that point, is that the consistent feeling amongst everyone that, there's some anxiety and concern about going back?
I'll personally speak for myself, and in regards to Brianna's comment, this is something that my dad's taught me since I was like 5 years old, and LeVar Ball has said it before. He says like run your own race, and when you don't run your own race, you're gonna go to someone else's lane and crash the opportunities that's like set up for yourself in the future. So in terms of like my school year, I'm excited to come back because I went through the school yesterday and I realized I know half the people in my school. So I'm kind of like, okay, I need to get readjusted and network and meet new people. So I'm personally excited, and I think the future has great things to come ahead, and I'm excited for the new opportunities. But also, I suffer from anxiety. I always think about, oh, what if this happens or what that happens? But that's just not healthy, and it's a sad way to live because you're always worried about something that might happen. So that's my comments.
And I will also say that I'm excited to go back just because I guess just to like give you hope, Rihanna, that college is a lot better. It's a lot different. And I think you'll enjoy it a lot more and you'll get to sleep a lot more than you do in high school. But yeah, so I mean, I'm excited just because it'll be a lot different and I'll just see a lot more perspectives than I did kind of in that bubble that I was in high school.
Well, definitely, want to share, I think with adults, kind of what are those things that you feel like would be helpful as we transition, and that could, just even starting with particular empathy, but are there particular things that, as you think about going back, that you feel like, gosh, if this were different, that might make it a little easier?
I think one thing that I've enjoyed from something that my teachers implemented during COVID when we were doing virtual learning, I found it very meaningful when they reached out to students individually and struck up conversation and asked if we were okay and if there was anything they could help us with, like school or otherwise. And I've also appreciated how understanding I've noticed teachers have been of students' diverse situations this year, because I didn't feel like they were really super aware of what all of their individual students were going through before the pandemic.
Great call out. Individualized attention and focus. Any other thoughts?
I think that the teachers, especially at my school, I love them. They were very aware of student social cues and our schedules. For example, now that we're on Zoom, they will be able to ask, where is Gerard? Gerard's not here today. When we were in school, or they'll say, someone text Gerard, because we'll have each other's numbers. And it's just like, wow, you care. You care about where I am. And because they implemented a remind, they'll text you on remind, are you okay? Yeah, or things like that, or just little things that teachers did to make it personal. For example, my psychology teacher knew it was my birthday, and she said, go to Jenny's ice cream and take a picture. So it was just like little things that made it personal, and it was great. And being able to contact your teacher so easily was also great. And like Mira said, like them keeping in mind social, economic backgrounds and mental health, that was really at the forefront. And I think that we should keep that at the forefront as we continue on our academia. And that's it.
Thank you for that, Brianna. Thank you. Let me just shift our conversation because I don't want us to miss out on the significant experiences in 2020 and some of 2021 in terms of tragic events with the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others. And we really want to hear your insight and thoughts on how those experiences, seeing those, impacted you and your friends, and what were you hearing, seeing, and experiencing. And Gerard, I see you're off of mute.
Personally, I had to cut a lot of friends off after the passing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, just because I feel like that they really didn't have my best interest at heart. Because at first it's like, how can you not support something that is meant to protect people that look like me, and people that talk like me and people that had the same hair color as me. And I thought like it was a lot of self. I had to look in the mirror. It was like, who are really your friends in life? Because if you can't support this cause, I can't say you really support me. And so that was adjustment I had to make. And at football field, there was a lot of arguments in the locker room about people saying comments or supporting people that just wasn't human like. And that was a deep discussion that had to be made. And I think it was a good one though, because this cannot just be a 1 year Black Lives Matter and then that's it. This is a problem that has lasted for decades and centuries that needs to be addressed now.
Thank you, Gerard, for that. And you know, I don't know that we always think about the loss of friendships that take place as a result of experience like this. Other thoughts? If you were, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, but I didn't hear because my Wi-Fi went out for a second. So if you could like repeat the last part of what you said, that would help.
Your thoughts and experiences from, you know, experiencing the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and how that impacted you and your peers.
Okay, just to make sure we are still on that topic. Well, it was a lot, but not in the regular sense, because my opinions or the way that I voice myself is very question based, and it's very stuck on like love being the center. It was kind of hard when everything was going on because people are very hypersensitive, and when people are feeling hypersensitive, they tend to jab or they tend to isolate others who seem different from them. And it was really a big learning experience for me because in my eyes, the George Floyd was no turn of events. This is things that have been happening, stuff that has happened worse by police officers, by community quote unquote leaders. And it's just, it was just eye-opening though, in another sense, that on this particular occasion, the whole world stopped. And now people in Europe are marching for Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter is a whole organization now. And it's like a whole thing to have it in your bio. And so it was just like, for me to stop and start asking questions on things that I didn't quite understand. And like, along with the George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, it was a lot of other things that followed around gender equality, around LGBT, around Asian hate, and around just all these different things that all just started to come together. And it was just like, what made this time different? And I feel like what made this time different is the pandemic, honestly. And that's because a lot of us were struggling at the same time in general. No matter white, Black, brown, Latina, it didn't matter. We were all struggling. And when the George Floyd video came out, along with Breonna Taylor, it was just like, so we're at home and we can still be killed. That's number one. Number two, there's still people on the street just trying to buy a pack of cigarettes, you know what I'm saying? And they're getting like body slammed and choked out on the ground for reasons that there's no reason for that, just because in my eyes, that's against our nature, which is love. And so when everything was going on, I was kind of like in observation mode and very much in question mode, because what it took out of white people was for them to be understanding and for them to understand their role in it, even if it's not a direct role, it's still a role. And for them to not feel guilty, but like I said, feel in a place of understanding of, wow, this is really happening to you and I can do something for it. Like, I don't want white people to feel guilt for their privilege. I want them to feel responsible for it and like, oh, I can use this to help you. And that's kind of the place that I was at, because I'm just a very solution-oriented person. And so when everything came down, I was just like, we're very touchy. Ask more questions, you'll understand better, and we'll do better.
Thank you, Furu, for that. And coming from a place of inquiry and questions and love. And something you mentioned, I do want to call out specifically around attacks on Asian Americans. And I know that, you know, Mira, you had some particular thoughts around that and what that experience was like watching.
Yeah, I know myself and several of my Asian friends, we started feeling anxious for our parents and grandparents when they go out, because during the pandemic, there was a significant rise in hate crimes against our community. And I mean, I know myself, and when I talk to several of my friends, we learn like we've been just calling our parents or grandparents, and I've been calling my mom sometimes when she's out just to make sure she's okay, because I've kind of started feeling afraid for her during this time.
Hmm. Hmm. Any other thoughts? Thank you, Mira.
I think social media just makes us desensitized to these things. It makes it normalized. I don't really want to use that term, but yes. And like Mira said, it makes it so then you think this can happen to my brother, my mother, my father. And I don't want it to create a fear in our youth. I just want it to be informative, like let them know that it is happening, but I don't want to instill a fear in our minority youth at all.
Let me ask you all, as you mentioned that, before we go to our next segment, you know, what are some of those things that, as you think about, you've been experiencing like anxiety and fear, and, you know, what are some of those things that parents can do to help, you know, with those feelings? Where if you know, knowing that mom is at work or in the other room, or what would you say? Go tell her this.
I would say, like, I saw the question that was in the Q&A on checking in and everything, and that's something that, you know, I've been trying to work on with my mom, and that she's been trying to work on with me, is like what's the best way to like check in with me and to, you know, see what's going on and to get like, I guess, like reception from me. And I think the best thing is to kind of give me the space to realize that I kind of like need you, instead of like kind of like, I guess, pushing me to tell you things. Because, you know, there was a time sophomore year when I was like in high school, when I was like really depressed. And, you know, one thing that you do when you have depression is you isolate a lot. And so when I was isolating, my mom would do a lot of like, she would come in and interrupt me and like interrupt my schoolwork and stuff and ask like, tell me what's happening, like, please tell me, and things like that. And that felt a lot more like anxiety inducing, a lot more crushing. And I think the best thing a parent can do is to just let your kids know that you are open to listening and they'll come to you. And I guess I'm not sure what to say if they don't, but if they're not, then it could be that like when they do, they might feel like they're not being heard. So like when you're listening, try to not, you know, have a lot of judgment. Try to do like active listening and really hear what they're saying and not think about like what you want to say or what you want to tell them. And I think that that's the best advice I could give, because that's what's helped with my mom, is that, you know, when I tell her things, she like has worked on not judging them, on not, you know, really interrupting, on not kind of giving her opinion constantly with it. So I think that's advice that I would give.
Thank you, Andrea. Other thoughts for dad, mom, other adults who are listening that have you just like you?
I definitely relate to Andrea's point about wanting our parents to be there for us, but instead of, constantly asking us like what's happening in our lives, I think them just letting us know that they're there for us any way that we need them was super helpful for me, at least, when my parents did that, because I mean, us teenagers are at a time when we are, wanting to learn to become independent and form our own identities. But being stuck at home has kind of made that a challenge because we're not going out into the world or going to school or going places and learning, how to interact with others or learning about our passions. And I think it's just been very difficult to kind of form your own identity during this time when there's the lack of experiences that you would normally have to help you do that.
Good point. It's a different time to be kind of figuring out and learning who you are. And I'm hearing that theme of just letting you and youth your age know that parents are there. You're there. Other thoughts to add? Malachi, you want to add anything?
Personally, in our household, my mom, at a very young age, my mom set like that rule, like anything that bothers you, that's school, that's personal, relationship, friendship, you can come to me, because living in a single parent home, you only have one parent. So, and I was taught that if I hurt your feelings, you hurt mine, tell me. And oftentimes, myself, my twin, and my sister, we go downstairs and we have those conversations, and it gets deep sometimes. And I think what my mom does is she creates that space, that truthful space. And I think more parents should do that, is create that space.
Thank you.
I just want to say that I love that. I really love that. I just love when I hear parents have that great balance of not being a friend to their child, but having that relationship with their child. And I really love that your mom does that, because my mom is the same way. And I just love that you can go to your parent as like a parental figure. You can ask your parent a question and they are not going to put you under scrutiny. That is a big fear with children, because they don't want to let you down as a parent. They don't want to let you down, but they want to tell you what's happening. And most of the time they just want your advice and they don't want to get punished. So when your child goes to you, don't say automatically, you got an F? No, you got an F, I'm going to punish you. Your child is going to you because they want your advice, or they're just looking for companionship. So I really love that your mom does that, because my mom is the same way. And that's why I love my mom.
Oh, feeling the parent love here. Go ahead, Eva.
So I'll also comment on that, and it's really just piggybacking on what mostly everyone said. And I want to say that initially I was going to say, when it comes to bringing support to your children, especially when they're going through like depressive episodes or depression in general or anxiety, it's like, it's exactly what Andrea said, is when you're coming to them and you're like, hey, there's a listening ear for you, but do not go into any conversation with a preset of what you're going to say or what you want to impart on them. You just have to come in with an open and truly listening ear, and like she said, to actively listen to them, because I know I have a sibling that goes through heavy mental health episodes, and the biggest thing that I've learned is literally just listening to her, and sometimes just being in the presence of her. So even though sometimes she'd be like, oh, I want to be isolated, da 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 da, I know that because I know my sibling, sometimes I just need to take her up out the room and we go somewhere. And I don't overbear her by being on top of her, like, are you having fun? Are you having fun? Are you having fun? But just to get her out of the house, out of her room, out of that environment that she has now created, and to refresh herself, and to then go back to her room and create a new environment. And like for parents, it's just having that understanding. And I know parents are so scared, so scared of what a child is thinking about or what they're capable of, but you just have to have faith that these are just growing pains for your kid and that they will get through it. And to comment secondly on what Malachi and Brianna was talking about is, or Brianna, my bad, that conversational kumbaya is everything, because my mom does the same thing. Like, we'll sit down in the dining room or the living room and someone will say something, be like, you know what, you really hurt my feelings when such and such happened, right? And then it's just like, oh, here we go. And it's almost like all right, take a seat, sit down, get some water, because we about to be talking. And I love when Malachi said, you hurt me, I hurt you. Okay, well, let's talk about it, because that is so important to feel. It's okay to feel hurt. It's like, okay, I got hurt, but it's the way that you exercise that hurt that matters the most. And if my mom hurts my feelings, I always know that I can voice my opinion truly without being disrespectful, and her not taking it as me being disrespectful, which has been like gold in my childhood and developmental years, as far as senior year in high school has been. It's just been everything.
Thank you all for sharing that so much. We did get a question in the chat I want to make sure we address, and that was, where are you finding healthy resources to support mental health as a teen? Do you feel like there are quality mental health resources to support you? Brianna, you want to kick us off?
I don't think I'm a good resource for this, because being at a public school, the counselors are overwhelmed, and the psychiatrists are usually going to the ones that are like low income, or have like, I don't want to say real problems, but urgent problems that needs to be addressed. So I don't really know what to do. For example, I've never been to a therapist, so I don't feel like I'm a good resource to answer this question.
Well, I think that's an important note to share, where there is opportunity. And with that, actually, I'm going to introduce our next panelist, who is a young woman, but not a youth. And she is the CEO of BYE and the director of the Community Resilience Project. And she, in partnership with Foundation for the Carolinas and retired VP of Civic Leadership, Carol Morris, developed a student mental health report, and is working on a mental health campaign. And so I would like to let Bernicia Crawford tell a little bit about her work and opportunities to get involved. So welcome, Bernicia.
Thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth. And I'm just going to give a little round of applause to all the panelists on here. You guys have shared some amazing information. So I'm probably not going to share anything too different or new from what you all have already heard from our panelists today, but I will talk briefly about the work that we've done over the past few years. If we don't mind sharing slides, here we go. So we've been working on a student mental health campaign, in partnership with the Foundation for Carolinas and CMS. And what the goals of this work was really for us, I'm trying to go to the next slide here. Doesn't look like it's gonna let me, there we go. So the goals of this campaign was really to create a sense of urgency and caring to tackle the social and emotional needs of our students and our youth, and also to reduce the stigma associated with mental health, as well as raise awareness on early signs when youth are experiencing challenges with their mental health. This came about a few years ago, back in 2018, when Mecklenburg County was experiencing some high rates of suicidal ideation and death by suicide in students. And it just hit really close to home to a lot of us. And so we really wanted to focus on reducing that, that type of trauma to our community. This next bullet point, which is really important, I'm going to read word for word, but it's really to promote improvements in overall well-being, kindness, and respect for one another. And that word kindness is the word that stands out the most to me. Because if we were just all a little bit more kind to each other and ourselves, the world would just be a better place. And lastly, last but not least, our goal was really to build support and commitment for us to expand this work, continue this work in the community. So when the amazing Elizabeths and Bernicias and Ifrus and Briannas and everyone else on this call, when we're not here, this work still continues. So what I'm going to walk you through on our next slide here is just kind of highlight of our progress. So back in 2019 is when we actually started to engage students, teachers, parents, and counselors or other supportive staff within the schools. And we were able to engage 5 high schools and 4 middle schools. What we did was had all of these focus groups, and we asked folks questions around what brings you stress, what brings you anxiety, what do you do when you are stressed, what do you do when you are feeling alone. And so we asked all of these questions back in 2019. Our plan in 2020 was to have this event and bring folks together to share this information. But as we know, the world stopped in 2020, and lots of things, lots of plans that we had just kind of came to a halt. And so what we decided to do was also re-engage a few groups to kind of ask, how is it living through COVID? Has the things that stressed us out before, have they shifted, or are they the same? And so now that brings us to 2021, where the world has started again, and we are able to convene again. And so what we hope to, and we're really, really close to completing all of these, but having a strategic plan, a fundraising plan, a pilot, as well as the launch of this entire campaign, this year, so it can, to highlight all the work that we've done, and then move forward. So here are a few findings from the report and all of our conversations. And I'll spend time, not too much time on this. I'll try to go as quickly as possible to honor our time that we have remaining here. But if we look at what students said, again, this will not differ too much from what you heard today. But students said academics was the #1 stressor for them. Caring about grades, caring about getting into college. They also stress that, because they have so many different classes to manage, there was some disconnect between teachers. So teachers only cared about being successful in that class versus in their class versus caring about the success of their student in another class. Students felt that there was a disconnect. Confidentiality was a huge barrier to students. So we can say that we adults will listen, but if students feel like they can't trust us, and they also feel like the confidentiality between themselves and an adult will be broken, that will deter them from having a conversation. But their recommendation was, can we talk more about this? And I remember specifically, very vividly, students saying, Renisha, when are you coming back? Because we really enjoyed this conversation to talk about these things. We've never been able to have these types of conversations. So when we talked to parents, our parents said that they were unaware of the resources that were available to them in the schools and in the community. And their recommendation was that we increase access to affordable therapeutic services, therapeutic and social services. Teachers shared that they didn't feel like they were fully equipped to deal with the mental health needs of their students. And I share this all the time. A math teacher specifically said, I'm good at teaching math. I am not good at handling a student who is having a panic attack because of math, right? I don't have the tools to help that student get through that. And they also, teachers shared that they got stuff that they have to deal with themselves, that, you know, yes, their job is to come in and teach students, but they also have a world that they don't bring into the school or into the classroom that they also have to deal with. So they also wanted some help dealing with their own things. And CMS has done a fabulous job at offering some of those trainings around resilience and trauma to the teachers. For counselors and any other supportive staff, they shared that, and I'm sorry, I went forward, there we go. They shared that they spent a lot of time completing paperwork than actually interacting and counseling students. And their recommendation to us was that we be more proactive with parents and students. And what you heard all of our panelists talk about is the importance of their relationship with their parent and how that has had a huge impact on how they deal with the things that stress them out. So there's alignment there. When we had these conversations during COVID, and I know we're still in it, we're almost there, we're almost through this thing, but 95% of the students that we engaged with said, yes, I have access to my counselor, but I still feel uncomfortable talking to them. So that uncomfortability is what we need to address. We can get more counselors, but if students and youth still feel uncomfortable talking to them, then what good will it do? So we got to figure out, how do we address the uncomfortability? The stressors were, you know, nothing new: remote learning, going to college, getting exposed to COVID, things of that nature. But there was positive impact, and you also heard this reflected with the students too, that they felt less pressure and they had more time to self-reflect. The last thing was the recommendation. It was still the same, which was to create ways to listen to students, whether it's individually or in groups. And that was also something that our panelists highlighted in their discussion was, can we create the space for us to feel like we're being heard, and, you know, create a space where there is no judgment, but there is true connection. So these are the findings from our many conversations, and we plan to continue these conversations as well as create a plan where we do not just talk about mental health this year because of what has happened in 2020, but this becomes an ongoing normal thing that we keep at the forefront and that we prioritize when it comes to our youth.
Thank you so much, Renisha, and thank you for the great work that you're doing. We will make the link to that report available after this session today. And so appreciate again and look forward to all of the great things that are going to come out of that study and as a part of the campaign. I do want to bring it back to our panelists for just some final thoughts around you know, anything related to what you heard that resonated with you, and what is that final message that you would say to those that are helping youth, parenting youth, investing in youth and teaching youth. What final message would you leave for them? And I will start with Gerard, and then Gerard, I'm going to ask you to tag the next person. So I identify the next person to go.
Thank you. So personally, I feel like a great way we can help our youth is just by being an ally. Listen to our kids and understand that this is a ongoing situation in terms of the pandemic, and there's going to see a lot of new stuff. And so we need to change as the time goes. So just being an ally and not an enemy to our students, our young folks, I think that will really help this next generation and progressing and furthering society. The next person I'd like to transition to is Brianna.
Thank you, Gerard. I really liked how in the presentation it's apparent that teachers are not social workers. Teachers, their job description is to teach the student, not to help with socioeconomic issues or any type of mental issues that the student may be going on in their lives. but we cannot negate the fact that there are issues and the counselors are overwhelmed with work, and some teachers just happen to be there. Most students don't have the relationship that they desire with their parents. So the teacher being there, that's that parental adult figure that is there that they can talk to and seek for guidance. I really like that in the presentation. And I think the education system as a whole needs to work on that. But as a community, we can also use our organizations such as our Charlotte Mecklenburg Youth Council, things such as Girl Scouts, church groups, organizations that have adult figures in there, but it's mostly youth-based. So the youth will be able to engage with each other and realize that they are not alone. And the problems that you are facing is not, you're not by yourself. I will pass the torch to Mira.
Thank you. Yeah, going back to your point, I definitely, and of Gerard as well, it definitely means a lot to have an adult, like a teacher, parent, or just mentor in your life who you know champions your success and well-being. And especially during COVID, it's definitely hard to support youth because this is a time when we should be, you know, discovering our identities and new passions, but everyone's feeling very discouraged. So it means a lot to feel supported by organizations or people who are just giving us opportunities and helping us find our voices. And it's even more so now. It feels very meaningful, especially that we've lost that sense of normalcy. I'll tag Malachi next.
Thank you. What I would share with adults is being willing to listen, being willing to be present in the moment. Because sometimes adults have a lot of stuff going on in their lives as well. And sometimes youth, we forget that. But one thing I would say is allowing the youth to express how they feel and creating that space, like I was talking about earlier, and Brianna was talking about earlier, creating that environment that I can tell you how I feel, I can express how I feel, and you not assume what's happening, but hear it from me, what's going on. So I would say being in the moment. And I would tag Andrea.
What I would say to kind of best be an ally, the way Gerard mentioned, was is to really try to understand the perspective of what it is like to be our age, and to be just like what it's like to be, I guess, at our level of maturity. Because I feel like that's the kind of thing that would have helped me a lot more when I was a lot younger. Thinking about like what I knew back then is so different than what I know now and what I've realized now. And I think that adults kind of have a tendency to forget what it's like to be that young and what the kind of thoughts they were having and the kind of things that were important to them back then. So I think it's really important to just to try to empathize with youth and to try to remember, like, or try to understand like what their perspective is and how they view the world. I think would be really helpful. And if we were next.
I would say that I know, like, going back to the presentation, Ms. Vernisha was talking about it being like our solutions are the same every time, and that's to be listened to. And I'm just thinking about the sizes of public schools, and is that maybe the problem? And if that can't be fixed anytime soon, then maybe having a platform that the school system has created for us to reach out to these teachers and counselors, and for also the teachers and counselors, at least the ones that are coming in, to have some kind of training in it. Because what's not going to happen is students aren't going to be like, oh, my math teacher is not equipped to deal with my stuff, so I'm going to not, I'm going to not go through it. That's not going to happen. So it's like becoming a teacher, like I think Brianna said it earlier, having that parent to teacher kind of relationship, because I know myself, I don't know if anyone else, but we've built these connections with these teachers that we've known for 4 years. And it's just like, oh my God, like maybe my parent isn't active in my life and she isn't supportive. I'm going to, as a child, I'm going to reach out to find it somewhere else. And the best case scenario is that I reach out to a teacher and not to the streets. And so for these teachers coming in to have social emotional intelligence classes and workshops and to learn these things and to even just to learn the basics would make all the difference, because when you have a foundation, everything else that you build on top of it is okay. It's not going anywhere. It's not falling through. So I just feel like the solutions are really around systematically what we need to do for mental health and how serious we have to take mental health as a system, and for us to provide our teachers with mental health resources so they can in return be our resource, because it's going to happen like that. We're with them 8 hours of the day for like 100 and some days. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Ifrua. Thank you to all of you, each of you, for your great comments, sharing your voice, your insight, your expertise, and really being youth leaders in our community. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. I'd like to thank our Foundation for the Carolinas leadership for their support of this important work, as well as Generation Nation Executive Director Amy Farrell, and Aisha Struthers, Dee Rankin, and John Davis, and all of those that helped put this together today. So everyone, I encourage you to take this information, share this with others, and we look forward to seeing you next time in August for our conversation on boys of color and challenges and opportunities. But again, thank you to the panel. You all are amazing. Thank you, Bernicia Crawford. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.